What I'd like to do now is tell you a story about investigating sound with children of different ages. Um, these experiences all happened before COVID, but I think many of the ideas could be applicable in an online setting. And what I'm hoping for this next little piece is that it can be as interactive as possible. And so I really invite you to put comments, questions, ideas about how you might elaborate or modify or improve these ideas for the setting that you're in the chat box. So let's go ahead to the next slide. For younger children especially, but even 3-5 students, before they start thinking about and understanding ideas about how sound travels, they really need to understand a little bit more about what sound is, some basic concepts that can be explored. And so I did that with some students, and I wrote on the chartboard the question, what is sound? But to give that very broad question some focus, I suggested that as students were investigating with some materials that we had together, what is sound? They start with, how do we start sound? How do we stop sound? And these questions could easily be incorporated into an asynchronous platform like the Padlet you see right here. Or Jamboard or Seesaw. And we investigated pretty simple things that vibrated as they made sound. So you can see a rubber band around a cup or a ruler held on the edge of a table. And many of these items are pretty easy to find. So it could be that students collect them and then explore with you online like you did today in today's session, or perhaps they do it asynchronously with either themselves or with a sibling or adult at home. And kids could take pictures and add text about what they're finding, and then you can use those in a synchronous discussion to try to make sense of their investigation. And I think you'll see that there's a lot of language here kids are using to help develop the idea of vibration, what a vibration. And you can hear when you make a sound with a ruler, the numbers jump up and down. And all of those things can help students connect to this idea of a vibration and can start to connect that sound is a vibration, or they might phrase it as sound makes a vibration or vibrations make sound. And one of the ways that I have found useful in a meaning-making discussion is to use the trajectory of questions, starting with, how did you make sound? So kids will often talk about pushing or pulling on something and seeing it vibrate. How do you stop the sound? And one important thing that comes out of that is students notice, just like Diana was telling us, or no, I'm sorry, Gwendolyn, when she stopped the rubber band, the sound stopped. And actually, that's very compelling evidence to most students that sound is indeed a vibration. And then we can move on to defining sound. And by then, most kids are comfortable with saying sound is a vibration, or a vibration makes sound, etc. So let's go ahead to the next slide. And when I was working with kids in the classroom, the next thing that we explored was, okay, if sound is a vibration, then how does sound get to your ear? We have a source, a start of the sound, and maybe it's tapping on something or plucking on the rubber band. And eventually that sound gets to our ears. So how does the sound get from the source to our receiver or our ear, the thing that receives the sound? And to do that, it's really helpful to explore solid materials. So you could do activities like these online. I mean, you just did secret bells and head harp, and those would work really well. Or if you wanted even simpler activities, kids can put a pencil in their mouth and tap on the end of a pencil. You know, I'll show you right here. Yeah, Kelsey's got it too. Or they can put their head on a desk and tap elsewhere on the desk and listen for that sound. Or they can even hold their finger up to their ear and tap on the end of their elbow and they can really feel the vibrations much in the same way that many of you were describing. Diana had some really nice language about how the sound continued up the string and then she felt it in her finger and her jaw and her ears. And that can be really compelling evidence for students that sound travels through something to get to the receiver. There's some pictures on this slide of students investigating paper cup telephones, and I found that to be a very compelling thing to investigate for kids, because they will often touch the string and feel that it's vibrating. They can feel the vibrations back and forth from that string as they gently touch it. But if they pinch it, they stop the sound and the person on the other end can no longer hear. And you could try that yourself with head harp, for example, or secret bells, sorry. So let's go ahead to the next slide. And I'd love to talk just a little bit about the practice of modeling supporting informational writing. You can see here, I've made an outline on this paper of a person's face and the mouth speaking into a cup, and the string, and then the cup on the other end, and the receiver or the ear. So we have a source, and we have a medium or something that this sound is traveling through, and then we have a receiver. And I'd like to engage kids in some modeling around their ideas of how sound gets to our ears, to the receiver. And in this case, I've provided an outline, which can be really helpful either for younger kids or for kids that are new to modeling, because then they don't spend as much time on all the elements of the system. They can focus their time on the concepts they're trying to communicate, which is how sound gets to our ear. And the process of making a model is really useful to the learner because they're working out what they think is important. They often start with what they think is interesting about the concepts that they're learning. And they often run up against the edges of their understanding and have to work through conceptual confusion when they're creating these models. And this process is a great scaffold for expository writing. And Kelsey, if you can click the arrow, questions useful. Let's see, are they coming up? Yes. Questions that are really useful for older students to use when they're writing expository text. Because in informational writing, the goal is to write a text where the writing acts like good teaching. So in planning their expository texts, students can think about, what do I want my audience to learn? You know, what's important? What will interest people? What will be confusing? Those are all things that students are working out as they're creating models. And so those models can be a great springboard for longer expository text pieces. I think it would be really fun if we tried together an interactive writing or modeling session right now that could be a springboard for some expository text. So I think we'll try with a Jamboard. Oh, thanks, Kelsey, you just called it up. And what I'd like you to do is just take a few minutes to think about what your students might consider important to communicate about sound travels, or what you think is important to communicate. And then you can share your ideas in the chat box, or you can unmute and share your ideas. And in this interactive writing session, we'll try to sketch your ideas for you on this model.
Really quickly, Rachel, I was just going to drop the link to the Jamboard in the chat box. So I'm just going back to the slides really quickly.
Thank you.
Can everyone see the Jamboard though now? Great. Okay.
I see we've already got some ideas about sound is energy that travels in a wave, which is vibration. So we have one idea of like this idea that sound travels, or the energy travels, and the vibration is what travels. And so what I might ask students to help me think through in a situation like this is, how can we show that vibration traveling through this system, this cup and the string and the other cup? What should we put on the page? someone's suggesting wiggle lines, or Diana, that's you. Thank you for suggesting that. Let's, Kelsey, try a few wiggle lines and see if that can help us show, show some of this vibration moving. I can see that you're showing lines of the sound coming out from the source in all directions, but you're also showing a little wiggle, which is some of the language that students used on the earlier slides to describe what that vibration is. So we can connect back this notion of something wiggling back and forth. So maybe that's something we can use to show that. And Yami suggested we show arrows to show the direction that the sound is traveling. Which gets across this idea that it starts someplace and moves through something or travels in particular directions. And Tom's suggesting a simple wave length. And Tom, can you tell us a little bit more, a simple wavelength? Do you, when you say wavelength, oh, is that what you added right there? That's really cool.
Well, that'll work. I was thinking more of like a wave, like an ocean wave. And then a directional arrow as you have on there.
Also,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, also students who feel more confident with, you know, some of the labels could actually put labels on here to help them. Just labels.
Absolutely.
Like maybe
what
they, yeah.
do you think we should add?
Well, they could put labels like travel. They could put waves. They could put some of the terminology that we really want them to get in the concepts. You know.
Yeah. And we could label the receiver, the source of the sound, and the receiver of the sound. And then Henry, I think Kelsey, you've already done this, but I really appreciated how Henry was building on other ideas of these wave lines or wiggle lines and saying, well, let's connect them to the mouth. Let's show that they start at the start. And yes, Tom, if that was you adding those images of the wave in there, I'm sure others would really appreciate hearing how you did that.
I didn't add the
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, whoever did, if you can let us know in the chat box or by unmuting, that would be great.
Yeah, sorry. I just went to the picture. Little icon looks like a little, I don't know, mountain over on the left, add image. And I did a Google search for a vibration GIF. And then I just was able to insert it.
Thank you.
Sorry. I don't know that's.
And you know, older kids have the ability to collaboratively contribute to this Jamboard with you. So if your kids are shy or reticent, you might start off modeling and recording their ideas, but they can also take the pen or add images or add text to this Jamboard. So it can really be something that a model that you collaboratively create. And so I'm just wondering, let's transition a little more since we have some, we have a sketch going with some of our ideas. I'd love to hear how you see using a strategy such as this with your students. Might you co-create some models to start to articulate your understanding of a particular science concept, or how might you do it differently?
We could use it as monitoring their learning of, you know, as you've already presented the concepts, you can see, you can monitor if your students are catching on by having them put something down in a model or what have you. And you can also use it as an exit ticket. You know, I'm thinking, I use this kind of things with English language learners at the high school, but because they're at that level of language where they're 3rd through 5th grade language, and it's been successful. Yeah,
that's great. Thank you for those ideas. And Yami's suggesting formative assessment, understanding what they know, and I could see that being really useful way to use this strategy as well, because you really see how they're taking up the ideas and what they're thinking about. And what do they think is important and what do they think is interesting? One way I could see using this strategy is maybe in one session, we're really working on a sketch or multiple sketches, and then we come back to it and add more details, add labels, see if there's any additional parts of the image we want to add. And then in a subsequent lesson, we can come back and start adding some text, a verbal description of what it was that we wrote. And so then we start building an expository text together using our model as the inspiration. Kelsey's suggesting that older students might be able to do this in small groups, each have their own Jamboard slide. And then the teacher could see all of them, and they could also be used as the basis for sharing in a subsequent discussion. Well, Kelsey, I think we can go back to the slides now, and I think it might be interesting to see some student work. This is a 4th grade example. Another way you might use the strategy of modeling, in particular as an impetus for expository writing, is to have students create a model asynchronously and then upload it to Jamboard or some other platform. And these student models could be the basis for longer paragraphs of text like we just talked about, but they can also serve as mentor texts, both for the science practice of modeling and for the process of informational writing, which often uses diagram and text to illustrate ideas for the reader. And so before I talk a little bit about using this as a mentor text, I'll just say that there are some really simple questions that are effective. You wonder. And then a third one, what do you think the author is trying to tell you? So this is a model created by a 4th grade student who did some pre-COVID investigations around sound. She's particularly writing about having the pencil in her ear, in her mouth, and then tapping on the end of it. This student also participated in some physical modeling of vibrations. And so she's had a lot of discussion and thought about vibrations and how they travel. And so
I just wanted to say on the wonder, you're touching on that. That's a great way to do a sentence frame for the English language learners, to put the sentence frame, I wonder, and have them create 2 or 3 I wonders. I wonder if, and then end it with a question mark.
Oh, thank you for that suggestion. And Danielle's put some really, really thoughtful comment in here, this idea of building understanding from beginning, middle to end of a unit of study. The visual representation is really powerful because students are just learning vocabulary in the beginning, and as they become more proficient, they can expand on their learning by adding labels, they can add more details to their drawing. They can go back, this idea of a model being iterative very much parallels the process of writing, which is an iterative process. And, you know, Lucy Calkins, who's someone I've taken a lot of writing workshops and read a lot of her stuff, uses a phrase, you know, when you think you're done, you've only just begun. And it really gets at that. Go back to your sketch that you made on this piece and add some more details, and that'll spur some more ideas for some more expository text.
Actually, the pictures are a great way for pre-writing anything at visual that the student makes themselves. So the model is doing the NGSS, you know, standard, but then it's a pre-writing, so it's an ELA as well.
Thank you for making that connection so clear and concise. And of course, as Yami pointed out, all of this begins with rich experiences for students. So they're doing their own investigating, and they're actually exploring the concepts themselves in order to be able to create these models and then the subsequent writing. In a you know, it would really be a nice little mini lesson for a teacher to post a piece of student work like this and ask students to reflect on it. What do they notice? What do they wonder? What do they think the author is trying to tell you? So Kelsey, let's just click the next arrow, and you can see the expository text that this student wrote in connection after making this model, this is the paragraph that this student was able to write. And you could go back to this as a model text and suggest not only students talk about what they think the author is trying to say, but how might we improve it? Maybe we want to add more details, or maybe we want to edit our work for some other purpose. So you can get a lot of mileage out of these various experiences. Yeah, and that's a lot of writing from a writer who probably would not have written as much without those investigative experiences and the modeling experiences, in my opinion anyway. So thank you, Yami, for that. And I think on that note, we should probably conclude this piece and turn things back over to Kelsey.